Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much for being here. My name is Luís Fraga, and I'm director of the Institute for Latino Studies and professor of political science. It gives me great pleasure to welcome all of you to this autumn 2018 Transformative Latino Leadership Lecture Series. As many of you know, the purpose of our lecture series is to bring accomplished leaders in the arts, politics, science, Catholicism, and many other areas who've reached undeniable levels of accomplishment from which we can learn. It is also our purpose to share the blessings that we have. We use the word blessings here at Notre Dame quite often. You're all supposed to laugh at that. We share these blessings with those with whom we interact, such as people from our fellow universities and colleges, secondary schools, and the wider community. So thank you to those of you who are from those areas for being here. I would like to thank the following co-sponsors of our event: the Institute for Scholarship in the Liberal Arts, the Hesburgh Program in Public Service, it's a long list, the Department of English, the Center for Social Concerns, the Department of American Studies, the Department of Film, Theater, and Television, the Department of Sociology, and my home department, the Department of Political Science. I would also like to especially thank Carolina Arroyo, who has led the work that has brought our guest speaker here today, and I want to thank, of course, my colleagues at the Institute for Latino Studies: Paloma Garcia Lopez, our Associate Director; Idalia Maldonado, our Events Coordinator; Lauren Melancon, our Communications Specialist; and Maribel Rodriguez, our Accountant, who pays all the bills, for all of their work to make this happen. Let's give them all a round of applause. I have the great honor of introducing our Transformative Latino Leadership Lecturer during this national designation of Hispanic Heritage Month. He is Luís Alberto Urrea, Distinguished Professor of Creative Writing at the University of Illinois, Chicago. Luís was recently described on NPR as a, quote, literary badass, end quote. I didn't know that badass was a literary term, but apparently it is. And, quote, a master storyteller with a rock and roll heart, end quote. This is an understatement. He is a critically acclaimed and best-selling author of 17 books who has received awards for his poetry, his fiction and nonfiction, and his essays. Let me give you just a small sample of some of those awards. He received the New York Times Notable Book and Christopher Award for Across the Wire in 1993, the American Book Award for Nobody's Son in 1999, Forward Magazine's Book of the Year Award for Six Kinds of Sky in 2002, a finalist for the Kiriyama Pacific Rim Prize and the Lannan Literary Award, and a finalist for the Pulitzer Prize for The Devil's Highway in 2005. He won then the Kiriyama Pacific Rim Prize for The Hummingbird's Daughter in 2006. And more recently, in 2016, his collection of short stories entitled The Water Museum received the American Academy of Arts and Letters Fiction Award and was a finalist for the PEN/Faulkner Award. Additionally, over 100 cities and colleges have chosen Into the Beautiful North, The Devil's Highway, The Hummingbird Daughter, and others of his books for a community read. His newest book, The House of Broken Angels, and all of his books, or almost all of his books, are available for purchase outside, and he will autograph books after his talk. His newest book, The House of Broken Angels, is a novel of an American family which happens to be from Mexico. Ángel de la Cruz knows this is his last birthday, and he wants to gather his progeny for a final fiesta. It was released in March 2018. Luís Alberto Urrea will talk to us today about his life and his work. I have had the privilege of knowing and hearing my tocayo for about 10 years now. That means person with the same first name, for those of you who are not bilingual and bicultural. I have always left knowing more about the subjects that are the focus of his writing than I could ever have imagined. more importantly, I have always left knowing more about myself, my values, my commitments, my aspirations for my work, and the aspirations for my life than I did before. He is a gift to all of us here today. Please join me in giving a warm and boisterous Irish welcome to Professor Luís Alberto Urrea.
Gracias, jefe. Buenas tardes, Indiana. Tijuana in the house. I come from Rampa Independencia, in the Colonia Independencia of Tijuana, Mexico. I want to talk to you a little bit about the journey, and when we're done, then if you have comments or questions, because I like to know what you'd like to know about, we'll talk about it. I like being here with the Irish because my grandma from Sinaloa was named Guadalupe Murray, which is why I look Irish. We were part Irish, part Mexicanos. My grandfather was Basque. Urrea is a Basque name. The Urrea brothers came over, not maybe as mercenaries, but as hired soldiers with Cortés and his bunch. And in Basque, the word Urrea means golden man, or the man of gold. So he was tall, semi-güero like me, and met my little red-haired, blue-eyed, rosy-cheeked Mexican-Irish grandma and began this genetic experiment, which was the Urrea family. My mother was from the United States, so she was actually from New York. She was kind of a socialite from New York City. And my father was a kid with no money. He didn't own shoes in Mexico till he was 13. He started working in the silver mines at 12. He mined silver up until military age at 18. He had to help amputate someone's leg underground at 14. It was a rough boyhood. But he had those looks. He looked, if you know your old movies, he looked a little bit like Errol Flynn. You know, he had this bright, blue-eyed look. Red/blonde hair. Of course, being Mexicano, he grew a mustache, so he was all dashing, as soon as he could anyway. And when he went into the military, which was compulsory in Mexico in his late teens, he was promoted. He did quite well, and they sent him from Sinaloa to Mexico City. And my father ended up on the presidential staff of Mexico. My mother, on the other hand, had gone to World War II in the Red Cross, and she was in combat. She was in the Battle of the Bulge. She helped liberate Buchenwald, the concentration camp, and was injured seriously at the end of the war. Came home wounded and could not find her way back into her New York culture, so she moved to San Francisco. We actually had relatives in San Francisco. They had a Mexican restaurant. And my father, once he was on the presidential staff, was sent to accompany Mexican politicians and military officers on their travels in the United States. It's no news to us, even in this day and age, that a lot of times in the United States, a brown face is not welcomed with open arms and love. And in those days especially, you can imagine 1948, 49. My father always told me, for example, "Mijo, you're never going to go to Texas. Promise me you'll never go to Texas." I said, "Why, Dad? Texas is cool, right?" He said, "No." He had gone on a visit with the president, and they threw the president of Mexico out of a restaurant for being Mexican. And they told my father, "You can eat here, you're a white man." And he never forgave that. Of course, I go to Texas every chance I get, but he didn't want me to. So they would send him to the United States, and they were sending a group of politicians and generals to San Francisco. So he went along because they felt that a blonde, blue-eyed officer. Is it too quiet? Louder? Wow. Is that better? That a blue-eyed, blonde officer with pale skin would alleviate some of people's resistance. So they flew up to San Francisco, and there was a party at the Mexican consulate. And the store where my mother worked as a jewelry buyer was asked to bring ladies to come dance and hang out and have champagne with the generales. And that's how my parents met, and they had a kind of a whirlwind romance. And various weird historical glitches ended up with my father marrying my mom in City Hall in San Francisco and whisking her off, instead of to Mexico City, to a great hacienda, to Tijuana, the Rampa Independencia, which in those days was a dirt street. In fact, the entire neighborhood was dirt, except the main drag at the top of the hill, which went past the church. And in the house where I spent my first years were my mom and my dad, Guadalupe Murray, my two aunts, Tia Irma y Tia Flaca, a couple of cousins, and a bunch of dogs. We were all jammed in this house, having this communal, mad Mexican life. And it was the world. I thought Tijuana was the world. It's where the music was. It's where the dogs were. It's where the joy was. It's where everybody I respected and loved and revered, they were all in Tijuana. And I was talking earlier in an interview we did this morning about the details of that barrio, which to me now are so magical in retrospect. I know all of us look back on our past and either see hell or heaven or some combination, right? But to me, the Rampa, if you could have gone back then, imagine this funky dirt street, my grandma's yellow house that my grandfather built by hand. At the end of the Rampa, there was a dirt cliff, and some crazy Mexican guy built a castle up there. So we had a castle with battlements up above the neighborhood, which was kind of a magical realist touch. Halfway down the hill, at the bottom of the hill, there was a house that kept a bear in the backyard. It was an old, funky, dusty, depressed oso, and he was chained to a tree. And we thought he must have been like a circus bear because he knew to wave at you. You'd be up on the hill, and all the kids would be like, oso, oso, psh, oso. And he'd look up and he'd go like this. And I had a cousin, Hugo Millán, who, I don't know if you have pistoleros in your family or not. He was an early gangster. And he was the most macho man I've ever known in my life. Hugo Millán always talked like this, right? When he was 7 years old, he talked like this. And his nickname for me was Luchi instead of Luís, which I hated because it wasn't macho. Everything was about being macho. There were dudes in the neighborhood named Frankenstein, El Dracula, El Coyote, La Puma, and then Luchi. But he would say to me, Luchi, do you want to go feed the bear? I'd say, yeah, Hugo, let's go feed the bear. He was older than me. And we saved up old tortillas so they would be stiff. You know how old corn tortillas get? And then we'd go down and we'd fly them like flying saucers. I always felt like we invented the Frisbee, you know? And the bear would wave and then catch them. And he'd eat them and just stare at us. And now I think he was thinking, if I could get up there, I'd eat your ass so fast. That was our world. And my mother and father would go to San Diego to work. She worked in a department store. My dad worked, having collapsed from the Mexican government because he refused orders. They were seriously bad orders. He wouldn't do what they asked him. He had to be smuggled out of Mexico City, which is how he ended up in Tijuana. So he got a green card and would come to the United States and found himself diminished in ways that he could not control. He, especially then, in the 1950s in San Diego, not a fun time to be a Mexican immigrant. My dad started out as a busboy. And he used to tell me this story that I thought was funny when I was a kid. And then I realized later it was not funny. He was a busboy at a fancy restaurant, and he looked out the window, and a bunch of his old generales and a couple of Mexican politicians that he had served were getting out of limos to come in and eat. And my father hid standing behind the curtains all night, listening to them have supper. From there, he went to a tuna cannery, and from there he went to driving bread trucks, which was awesome for me. They had a thing called Helm's Bakery back then in San Diego, which was like a bread ice cream man. And they would drive around all the barrios, and they had a little whistle, sounded like a train whistle. And they'd pull up, wee, wee, and people would come out and get donuts or whatever. And from there, my father finally went to bowling alleys. And that was where he spent the rest of his life. I was busy in La Independencia. I was busy learning how to play marbles, and fly penny kites. And we're talking this morning about the most magical part of all of that for me was going to the tortilleria. They would give me some money. Luisito, trae 1 kilo de tortillas. And I'd go off feeling like a big man. It was about 1/8 of a mile from our house, up the hill. And if you went left, you'd go to the church. If you went right, you'd go to the tortillas. I always liked the tortillas more than church. Went up, turned right, and you could hear them. To me, that sacred sound, And you could start to smell the maíz. And then you could hear the radio. And then you could hear the women inside. There were 4 to 6 women at a huge comal in the heat and the smoke, making tortillas and laughing. And I would show up. And, back in those days, a little blue-eyed, buzz-headed, blonde Mexicano, forget about it. I'd walk in and they'd be like, ay, mira mi rey. Ay, qué guapo el güerito. And I'd be like, yeah, I'm hot. Yeah, that's true, man. 7 years old. They're like, ¿quieres una tortilla, güero? Sí, por favor. And they take a hot tortilla and put salt on it and some lemon juice and roll it up. Ooh. And on a really good day, they'd put butter on it. I was like, dang. I was also having my first romantic training because I was looking at all of them thinking, you shall be mine. I will marry all of you. Just wait. I have to catch up. I was in love. Now, my grandmother, who ran the place when the other adults were gone, was a curious character. She was a lapsed Catholic. Catholicism was too much work for her. But she, wanted to stay in good with God. So she did a couple of stratagems. And I'm telling you this just to let you know where being a writer comes from. Right? It's your roots. She, every Friday, would cook fish for the priest. And he'd dutifully walk down the hill and sit down, probably thinking, do I really have to do this? And he'd eat her fish and thank her and leave. And then she got the idea, I don't want to go to Mass, it's a pain, but they burn incense up there all the time. Let's burn incense. So she started filling the house with cones of incense that she'd burn all the time. So the house started turning blue with smoke inside. And it never occurred to her to put them in saucers. So there'd be incense on the window ledges and on the old piano, everything stained and burned from the incense. And then because she thought, God could look down and see how much smoke. So she'd get some points. And at that point, I had moved on to San Diego, but I kept coming back to Tijuana. And I realized that I didn't quite know what those cones were. And she had also decided that she shouldn't throw out the burned cones, the sort of pale gray white cones of ash. So they were stacked up everywhere, but you couldn't make a ruckus around them so they wouldn't fall apart, right? And I asked my tia Flaca, who controlled the family with her tongue, what's that, tia? ¿Qué, mijo? What are those? What are all those cones everywhere. And my tia, who never liked messes because she didn't like to do housework and didn't want me to knock the ashes over, said, "Mijo, those are the souls of dead men. And if you touch them, ghosts are going to fill the house." Then, Grandma thought, wait a minute, holy water. So she called Hugo and me in. She said, "Muchachos, I need you to do something for me." I said, "Okay, what?" "Go to the church and steal holy water." So Hugo was up for this challenge. I thought I was going to hell for sure, but he took, if I remember, an empty aspirin bottle, and we went to church. I was the lookout, and he's at the font, you know, and then we ran all the way home, and she was so happy. She took the bottle, and she was like, yeah, bless the house. That's where I came from. It's interesting that before coming here, I looked it up on Google, and dang, if the barrio isn't on, you can say Colonia Independencia, Tijuana, and you will see my neighborhood, which now is all paved, blacktop, looking nice, but it's one of the murder and body dump spots for the narcos. And there are places I used to play with Hugo that have pictures of people's bodies on them, which I thought, wow. So when I think maybe it was rough, it really was rough. Not as rough as it is now. So we came to San Diego. We settled in the Barrio Logan, the same barrio where Juan Felipe Herrera, our former poet laureate, grew up. But we were at opposite ends of the neighborhood. And left that area at the end of 4th grade and moved up to a little suburb. My mom's people. She was with white folks at last. And it was interesting because I had no idea, aside from the kind of ethnic warfare going on in the barrio, that people didn't like us as Mexicanos. I was shocked to get to this neighborhood because I thought, this is cool. These guys have green lawns, man. I had not seen that before. I grew up eating peanut butter on a hot corn tortilla. La peanut butter. I thought everybody rolled up a peanut butter taco on a hot tortilla and ate it this way, Tijuana style, leaning over so nothing gets on your clothes, and that it was so hot that the peanut butter would melt and you take a bite and lick. I thought that's how everybody ate peanut butter. I was surprised to find that wasn't true. I found, however, the Boy Scouts, and I thought, I have arrived, man. Boy Scouts, I get to go out in nature. I get to go on hikes. I get a pocket knife. This is awesome, right? My dad, military man and muy Mexicano, hated the idea that I was in the Boy Scouts. Just the name of it bothered him. He always smoked Pall Malls, you know, and he would say, "Mijo, a Boy Scouts." It was the worst thing he'd ever say. I'd say, "Yeah, Dad, it's cool." No, que Boy Scouts, ni que Boy Scouts. I came home after a camp out, and he said, "Mijo, you're wearing shorts." I said, "Yes, my uniform, Dad. It's got knee socks." I said, "Dad, it's what we wear." And he said to me, "Mijo, if you want to be a man, join the army." I was like, "I'm in 5th grade, Dad." In the midst of all this transformation from dad world to mom world, I was in 5th grade. And I had all my new, white Boy Scout pals. And I still have my Tijuana accent, I was still talking like barrio. And I still thought things like a bike was called una baica, and lipstick was a lipisticky. And we were in the bathroom, me and my homies, my new homies, and one of the Boy Scouts said, and they didn't know what Urrea was. I was, of course, urea, which led to urethra, urine, diarrhea. Those were my names. And unreal, which is kind of cool. I didn't mind unreal. And one of the Boy Scouts says, "Hey, Unreal, you know what you are, man?" I said, "No, what?" He said, "You're a greaser wetback, man." I was like, "Que? What?" And they all started laughing at me. "Greaser, greaser, greaser." All my friends, "Greaser, greaser." And they went out together little dog pack laughing. And I stood there in the bathroom. And you know, when you're a kid, you internalize this stuff, right? You take it kind of literally. And I thought in that moment that we, Latino people, have grease on us that we don't see. I never noticed my grease. And I suddenly thought with horror, they see it. They see it. Every time I walk by, they look at my back and they're laughing at me because I'm greasy, man. And I remember looking in the mirror, taking off my shirt, trying to find it in the boys' bathroom. I couldn't find it. So, writing comes from a moment that happened after that. I came home. My mom worked in the daytime. My dad worked on the night shift at the bowling alley. Because my dad was un playboy, he liked being home all day because he could sneak his girlfriends in while my mom was gone. That was discovered, by the way, and he was sent packing. But he would wait for me. I'd get home about 3 o'clock from school, and that day I came home dragging, sad. And my dad was waiting for me. I don't know if your relatives are like mine, but all the old-timers in my family like instant coffee. To this day, they hate Starbucks. El Starbucks. They want café con bate or Nescafé. I grew up with this tinkity, 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 and oh, that's so good. It's like, to them, it was like Star Trek futurism. Tinkity, tinkity. So there he was with his black instant and his Pall Mall. And I walked in, and he said, "Mijo, what's the matter?" "Nothing, Dad." No. What's wrong?" "Nothing, Dad." He had, affectionate names for me. He said, "Cabrón." "What's the matter?" I said, "Dad, somebody called me a name." "Oh, really? What did they call you?" You have to understand about my dad that I thought he would expect me to go find all the Boy Scouts, beat them up, and when they're on the ground, kick them in the head. He was that kind of guy. I said, "They call me a greaser, Dad." And my father, when he was going to make a point, always held up his cigarette and tipped his head back. "You know what, mijo? I don't know if your parents say weird things to you or have in the past, you students." He said, "¿Sabes qué? In the western expansion across the United States, the Americanos came in covered wagons." I was like, okay, yes. "¿Sabes qué? The covered wagons are made entirely out of wood, mijo." I was thinking, my dad has had a stroke or something. I said, "Yeah, wood." And he said, "Even the axles were wood. Los ejes, they were wood, madera." So they would come all the way from Boston, wherever. They'd come west, mijo, y llegaban hasta Texas. They'd get right to Texas, Arizona. "Do you know what happened?" I said, "No, Appa. What happened?" He said, "The friction heated up the axle so badly that they caught fire. Se quemaba todo. Pobres gringos with nothing left, mijo, out there on the plains." Yeah, and the only people sophisticated enough to understand to grease the axles eran Mexicanos, son. He said, when they call you a name like that, hold your head up. They're too stupid to know it's not an insult. And off he went to work at the bowling alley to clean bathrooms. And I tell you, I knew he was lying to me. But I knew even as a kid in 5th grade that my dad had taken a story, pulled it out of his head to lift me out of my shame and horror into something else. That was magic. And I don't know that he knew he was programming something in me, but he did. So I got to go to college. I was the first in my family to go to college. My mom orchestrated that. She wanted me to go to the university. I went to the University of California. Started writing. I wrote all through high school. Wanted to be a famous author. And my father went to Mexico to retrieve some money for me. I was his first child to go to college. He had other kids. I have half siblings. that I wasn't raised with. And he wanted me to get a gift. And he went home like so many of Mexican dads do. He'd been sending money home all those years. He went to his bank in Sinaloa, got $1,000, American money, was bringing it back a 30-hour drive by himself, and he got caught by bad cops in Mexico near the Yuma border, and he ended up dead. And they didn't find his money. And a cousin of mine, Hugo, of all people, got hold of the money and brought it to me in Tijuana as I waited in the funeral parlor for my father to come. It was my senior year of college, during finals. And they brought my father's body in a station wagon. And when I went to thank these police officers, not knowing what had happened, they told me, well, you can't have him. And I said, why not? And they said, well, he's still in custody. And I said, pero está muerto. My dad's dead. And they said, no, that's okay. If you don't want to pay his bail, we'll just take him back. So they took the money he died to bring me a gift. He died to pay for his own corpse being purchased. Taught me a lot about the border. And then we had to bury him in an unmarked grave in Tijuana, because that was it. That was the end of all the money. So I had a really hard time adjusting to what life was about. And people were asking me at lunch today, how do I feel about all these people writing about the border? And I say, I don't necessarily feel that good about it. Because so many people write about the border because it's like the zoo. It's like a safari. People haven't invested tears and blood and love and history, I don't think, there. Unfortunately or fortunately, I seem to be one of the guys who has, so I write about it. Sometimes too much, but I do. Anyway, after my father was buried, a famous author came to my college and saw the only thing I could do to process, which was write about it. She saw the piece, took me into her workshop, and then coached me into becoming an actual author. And then she bought that piece and published it. It was my first sale. So that's how I sort of launched to come here to be with you today. And I just wanted to mention, I don't know how, we have about 15, 20 minutes before questions, right? I just wanted to tell you a little bit about this new book you heard about, because it has some resonance from that series of events. The one thing I do want to tell you is that after I got my BA, I didn't really know what to do with myself. I did all kinds of weird stuff. I was a cartoonist. I was a movie extra, being in Southern California. I was an extra in a Chuck Norris movie, so don't mess with me. Yeah, my role was guy bumped into by the bad guy running down the street, so it said on the script. So my entire part in the movie was to do this. It was great. But Chuck Norris was very sweet. We got $27 a day and a box of chicken. That was my movie star life. But I joined a missionary group working in Tijuana because I wanted to do something to give back. And so I spent a lot of years in Tijuana translating, taking care of garbage pickers and children and immigrants and prisoners. And, you know, I could tell you hours of what that was like. But I didn't realize that I was probably denting my own soul in some ways by going out, you know, and trying to be St. Francis all the time. But I had to do something of value. At a certain dark point in this time, I wrote to my former English professor who was now at Harvard. And I asked him if he could get me a job as a janitor. I said, I have never left San Diego except to go to Mexico. I've never made money. I'm dying here. I'm steeped in blood and trouble and suffering. Can I just come clean rooms? My dad's a janitor, I have been working as a public toilet scrubber on the graveyard shift. I can do it. Can you get me a job? And I did not know this guy was the second in command of their writing program for freshmen. He'd been the one who had introduced me to the famous author when I was a kid. And he wrote me back and he said, I think I can get you a job, but you're going to have to send me 3 published pieces. And I didn't get it. And I went to all my homies. We used to hang out in a donut shop. And I said, you know what? Harvard sucks so bad, janitors have to be published poets, man. And all of my friends, fellow blue-collar guys, were like, we hate the Ivy League, man, yeah. And I did it, though, and I got this job, which was a shocker to me. And in passing, and this is sort of the bridge into this new book I just wrote, my eldest brother of my half-brothers was named Juan Urrea. And Juan had always taken a really fatherly interest in me. He knew I liked writing, so he would send me books with my dad, because he was a big reader. And it's thanks to Juan that I discovered Ray Bradbury, which was one of the things that changed my life forever. Now, Hugo, you remember Hugo? He also sent books, but they weren't that kind of books. Hugo once told my dad, Tío, I've converted to Mormonism. My dad's like, what? He said, yeah, I know you don't like it, but I put the Book of Mormon in the glove compartment. Tell Luís, because I wanted to read it. So my dad got home and said, you know, Hugo sent you a Mormon book. I don't know, it's in the... And I opened it up, and it was 1,001 sexual positions in photographs. That was Hugo. Juan's were much more valuable to me. So Juan was really moved that this had happened, and he understood. The rest of my family didn't really understand Harvard, but he didn't understand what it meant to teach writing. And he had a family gathering, and he said to the family, this beautiful, you know, this Mexican kind of send-off dinner, and he stood up and he said, Familia, Luis's handwriting is so beautiful, he's going to go tell ricos how to write. Really nice. And I said, no, it's not the Palmer method, you know, it's creative writing. Oh. And he said to the family, today our carnalito goes from frijoles to Boston baked beans, which was a great send-off. So I was there, and I did all that stuff. And so now we live up in Illinois, live in Naperville. I teach at UIC, have been there for a long time. And my daughter and I used to like to walk the river through Naperville. That's where we live. And my family is all online, so they're always contacting each other. And I got a call on my cell phone from my niece, Millie. And she's like, Tío. And I don't know if you feel like I do, but whenever the family calls, I think, uh-oh, I wonder what the problem is now, because there have been a lot of problems. I said, yeah, Millie, what's up? My dad wants to talk to you. I said, okay. It was Juan. Carnal. Yeah? I've got cancer. I said, what? He said, I've got cancer. Bladder cancer. It's bad. And I didn't know what to do. You know, I sat on a stone wall. We talked about it for a while. And I said, have you heard of this thing called Facebook? See? I said, I've got some followers on Facebook, and I've seen people ask for prayer. You want me, because I couldn't think of anything, you want me to ask for prayers for you on Facebook? I said, yeah, I'd like that, Carnal. So we put it on Facebook. 150 people responded. I was giving him a tally. You know, Carnal, 75 people today. Carnal, 80 people today. Carnal, 100 people today. And it was so cute because people from every imaginable tradition were signing on. Of course, Catholics and Protestants, and Jewish people, New Agers, Wiccans. He was like, somebody's like, we're going to go out sky-clad under the moon and ask the moon goddess. And he was like, Carnal, there are naked witches praying for me? I said, yeah, you know. And then atheists, right? We're going to send reason and light to your brother. Thanks. All these people. And my brother went into remission. And they were like, it's a miracle. And I thought, maybe it is. And he came back. And so he did it again. Don't worry, Carnal. We're going to get on it. And the friends formed a group called Team Juan. And they had a logo made. And it was 300 people praying for my brother, and he got better again. And the last time he got really ill, he was dying. We were, as always, my wife and me, on tour, and we were driving through California, and I went to his deathbed to say goodbye. And I sat on it. He was hallucinating. He was seeing dead people coming in and talking to them. He thought his heart monitor was a coffee cup and kept drinking coffee while he looked at me like he didn't know me. And then he snapped to for a second. And I said, Carnal, I've got to go. I've got an event, and I should stay with you. And he said, no, you're working. We have to work. Go work. It's okay. And I said, you're my hero. And he said, still? I said, yeah, right? And off we went. And I didn't hear anything. And I was expecting horrible news. And one day, Millie called us while we were driving. Hi, Tio. I said, Millie, what's up? Nothing. Why? I said, your dad? Oh, no, he's okay. He went home. I said, what's happening? She said, it was a miracle. The tumors were gone again. And, part of you is like, will this man never die? But he got very weak. It had gone to his bones from the organs. And he was wearing out. Anyway, he was about to turn 74. And one of his granddaughters thought, this is going to be, they call him Pops, this is going to be his last birthday on earth. So let's give him a goodbye birthday party. And my brother was very, I won't say egocentric, but he had a strong self-image. And he really liked this idea because he thought, I can have a wake that I can attend, I can organize the wake, and then listen to everybody have to tell me how great I was in my life. And that's what he did. And he was tiny, he was in his wheelchair, and we went to this thing, and it was this amazing miracle of our people, in that every kind of Mexicano and Chicano you could ever imagine were all there at once. Every generation. And my brother in the middle in his wheelchair, sitting tiny as a little bird, watching all this, and people worshiping him and bringing him gifts and kissing his hand and thanking him. And I realized that he was hearing from everybody that he had changed the world in a million beautiful ways just by being a dad and being a pillar of his community and being a good guy. It was so moving. And there were, abuelitas and neighbors, and there's some cholos over there, and there were some ranchero-type dudes who wanted to always dance that weird dance that looks like galloping horses, that dance with the cowboy boots. And there were PhD candidates, and there were ballerinas, and then a bunch of Samoans went through, and I was like, who's the Samoans? Those are your primos. I was like, hey, all at once. It was the Mexican Finnegan's Wake. And during that time, that's where this book came from. And I thought, this is my chance to tell our story. It may be my last chance. I've been telling this story for 26 years. And dang if the country hasn't listened yet. I have to tell the same story over and over again. So I thought, I'm going to show these guys, especially because the political atmosphere had turned pretty nasty. I thought, I'm going to show them an American family, like you heard in the introduction, that are Mexicanos, but whose ancestors were here before Santa Anna sold it to the United States. We have cousins who are Apaches, Yaquis. They've been here always. So this was the story of my family, but the story of a fictional family. And there are moments in the book, I wanted it to be a complete celebration, to be really super joyous, but also really tragic. Because honestly, my brother didn't survive. He was dead within a week of that party. And one of the things that stays with me still, and one of the reasons I wrote the book, is that when he got really ill, he had to go to bed. All day during the party, he'd have to go lie in bed. And he wanted me to come see him. And I'd go down the hallway to him. And he had never been a man who hugged anybody. He never kissed anybody. Very, recto, como dicen, and he was lying in his bed, tiny, with pajama pants and an undershirt and white gym socks. And I walked in, and he was like, Carnal, come here, lay down. I said, what? He said, acuéstate conmigo. I was like, are you serious? He said, yeah, come on. So I got in bed, right? We were lying there next to each other, sort of looking at each other. And he said, carnal, I've been thinking. And I realized, if he was turning 74, right? If you turn 74, you only saw 73 Christmas mornings in your whole life, man. He said, it's not enough. And I thought, oh boy, I'm going to spend this time crying, I can tell, right? And then he says to me, oye, carnal, do Americanos kiss each other? So what? Do Americanos kiss each other? I said, you mean like in the movies? No, hombre, in families. ¿Se besan los gringos? I was like mom? And he said, no, carnal, mom doesn't count. If you don't kiss your mom, you go to hell. I said, yeah, of course. Everybody kisses each other. Somebody in some family. I've seen dads kiss their kids, their sons and stuff, right? Everybody does, sure. He said, how about brothers? Do they kiss? And I looked at him and said, you want me to kiss you? He's like, no, hombre, psst, nah. And he looked away and he said, yeah. I'd never kissed him before. So I kissed him on the forehead, right? And they were like, that wasn't too bad. No, it was okay. It was okay. That was the only time I kissed him. Who wouldn't want to write a book about us? To tell people that hated us, shut up. And it was during those days that people were also acting out some of the political agenda that was hurtful. You know, you'd be going to a funeral and they'd be holding up signs. Build a wall. Leave the country. You'd be in Target looking for things you needed to buy for the events, and somebody would come up to one of the women in the family and tell her, the president's going to throw you out of our country soon. And I thought, if I can put those scenes in the book where you least expect it, maybe readers would be hit by the shock that this family is feeling when that happens. So those were kind of political moves, but I always tried to keep it true to the thing. Anyway, when we were leaving, he was back in bed, and I went back to say goodbye to him. And he took my hand, and he said, never say goodbye to me. And I said, what do I say? And he said, tell me you'll see me next time. I said, I'll see you next time, which were our last words. And I left. I went on tour like I always do. I was in Texas when he died, so went back to bury him. And all that, it sounds so sad, but I knew the book had to be insanely funny because we're funny. We are funny people, as well as, you know, sometimes sad. So that's The House of Broken Angels, and it's been pretty great. It's done really surprisingly, amazingly for me. The paperback's coming. We sold it to Hollywood. We'll see how that goes. I just know they're going to get a bunch of Italian actors and Spaniards to play the Mexicans. I know they will. But, you know, we'll do our best. So that's essentially my story. And, you know, I'm always glad to see my tocayo. We first met at UW, so we just keep crossing paths. But if you have any questions or comments, I'll take them and try to answer them. We have about 15 minutes, right? I always look to the boss for guidance.
Thank you.
Well, thanks. I wasn't looking for applause. I was like, yeah, I think there are mics up there. Oh, everybody's shy.
Hi. Earlier today, you said you've been telling the same story for 26 years, I think?
Pretty much.
And do you feel like you're going to continue telling this story, or are you tired of it? And if you tell another story, is it going to be a happy book?
They're all happy. My books are funny as hell. Then you jump off a building. It's kind of weird. Yeah, I'm sure. I have 17 books, all 17 about the border, some way or other. It's interesting to look at other things too. I've spent a lot of time honoring my dad's culture, my family's culture. But you know, my mother was there. And my mother went through stuff that nobody could imagine. So I'm working on a big novel inspired by her experiences. And we're a little cynical at this point, my wife and me. And I just know it's going to get nominated for some award, and I'm going to have to say, I finally write a book about white people, and you guys want to give me an award. That's great. But I think, anyway, I want to write that. And the point of border stuff to me isn't about the wall. Build a wall. The wall is here in this room. There are borders everywhere I look. And my job is to try to find ways for us to talk to each other or listen to each other. You know, I tell my writing students, our job as writers is to love each other, fill the pen with love, write love notes, and then throw them over the fence to people who can read them on the other side. That's always been the case. So there's a fence that goes through every audience, and you can see it wherever you go between conservative and liberal, you know, between people in Bernie or Bus shirts and people in MAGA hats, between religious affiliations, between gay and straight, between black and white, between Muslim and Christian. There's so many fences. So I just think that the job is to always break down or whisper through anyway, whatever the border is that keeps us apart. Because there's only us, right? There isn't anybody else on this planet. Oh, Bigfoot. But aside from Bigfoot and us, that's it. So, you know, I think we need to understand there's only us. And I think it's scriptural. We were kidding today at lunch about, you know, I like to give audiences my Luís Urrea Bible off, and I say, let's set up a competition. You find all of the scriptures that tell you to be cruel to refugees, refuse to feed kids, don't help widows, don't clothe the naked. You find all of it. Be angry and assaultive to anybody who comes to you for help. And I will look over here and find the scriptures that say the opposite. Let's see who wins. Winner gets a new Hyundai. Oh, sorry, I win. Because you're not going to find those anywhere. You know, what do? I have to always, because I have religious roots, have to do what I think God wants me to do, what I believe God called me to do, right? And it turns out to be witness. So whether it's going to still be border stuff, traditional border, or other stuff, I still always try to write things of witness.
Thank you.
I want to thank you for your books because in my Mexican community, your Spanish is sort of like my Spanglish, so I figured I could live in Mexico and get by with your relatives. Into the Beautiful North, which I just loved. I thought it was hilarious, but it was very funny, and also all the things of sorrow that you said. When everybody came home, okay, and they saw them coming home, and all those guys decided to come home. So what do you think Tres Camarones was like after they came home? Because for me, that was almost like the second coming. That forget this damn country, nobody's going to pay attention to you anyway, except for that girl that wanted to stay with the missionary. But everybody else was coming home, and those women were there, and Tia was back there running the city, and those young women with their gay friend were coming with that crazy man.
Atómico.
Yes, thank you.
Based on Hugo Millán.
Yeah, bad memory, old lady, viejo. But anyway, so what was Tres Camarones like afterwards? Was it with the end times of wonderfulness? Better
Well,
than
I
anything
don't
we could
know.
imagine?
I don't know. That was it. I mean, you know, it doesn't exist. I just made it up. So what I think happened, Nayeli took it back. You know, that was the NEA, that's the NEA book that I keep going to schools for. And it started out as a book for you and me. I thought, hey, we all adults remember what it was like to be 19. And I thought, hey, adults are going to say, oh, I remember those days when I was 19. I would have done a crazy thing like that. I was naive and didn't think, oh, you know, 19-year-olds are going to want to read it. And in some ways, in its mutation over the years, it's become a kind of a YA book. And it went from adult readers to college, from college to high school. Now it's going into, middle schools. And I'm getting nervous. I'm a dad. I'm thinking, there's some pretty adult material in there. But the kids are pretty straight up. They're like, dude, your end sucks. Kids are always straight up with me. I say, no, it doesn't. My end is evocative and thrilling. And it's like, no, man. And always questions much like that. And what I should have done, I think I missed one beat, and I regret it now. What I should have done is made it clearer that she was back to take the town back. I inferred it, trusting readers would understand what was going to happen. But what I should have done is have her come out, and instead of Atomiko always saying, I am Atomiko, you know how he says it to everybody? Have her with the fighting pole and put it down and say, I am Nayeli. So you'd know she's coming. Now, it became a stage play, which has been going around the country. And that's a little clearer, because this playwright made it clearer. But I get a lot of requests for sequels. And I feel like, it's like my ladies' #1 detective agency books they want. The Adventures of Nayeli, Girl Detective or something. But yeah, one of the critics, the one who came up with this badass quote you heard from NPR, he wanted sequels. And I said, okay, so what are the sequels? And he said, well, there are 2 sequels. The second sequel is the Battle of the Town. You got to show us how she gets the town back from the bad guys. I said, okay. And what's the third sequel? And he said, The Gay Friend, his wedding. And I thought, can I skip part 2 and just go to him trying to get married in this little Mexican tropical town? That's a cool story. So one day, I think there may be. For a while, it was bought by TNT for a series, and then like TV does, they suddenly changed directions and dropped it. But people are starting to call my agent again, so it may become a media thing. I know the play is going to continue, so that's cool. So I suspect part 2, she takes the town. Yes, I'll keep it.
Student talking with this. So my question is, as a fellow Wea Mexican, did you ever have? I guess this is a more personal anecdotal question. Did you ever feel that you had to go the extra mile to prove your Mexicanness to your family and to the people around you in the community?
That's a great question. It depends. The secret ingredient is Spanish. I've had to go the extra mile in this country. I've never gotten death threats in Mexico. I've never had people offer to kill my children in Mexico, or hate calls if I'm doing media because I like tacos more than chili dogs. I can't even joke because I got a beaner name. People get mad. If I go to Mexico, usually people are super like, oh, my friend, how are you, my friend? I say, pues estoy bien. They're like, es más mexicano que la tortilla, cabrón. That happens a lot, and the secret ingredient is, I think, Spanish. There are 1 or 2 times when you're in a tough area, and somebody will confront you a little bit, but if you speak the right everything, people look at you like, whoa. But the other part is, we in Mexico know that we are the melting pot. In my family, there are Irish-looking folks, and there are mestizos. My brother Juan was brown with a black mustache, and we have African-American members, we have Chinese members, we have Apache and Yaqui tribal members, and now Samoans. So, I think it's communication almost always. I've never, one time in Sinaloa, where my cousins took me into a known narco cantina in Culiacan, that was a bad place to be a white boy walking in. No question. They weren't going to hear Spanish or anything else, so my cousins actually picked me up and carried me backwards, and we took off. It was a bad place to go. But otherwise, I never had that problem. Thank you. That was a good. I haven't been asked that before. That was good. What's up, boss? Is it time? Don Luís? Anybody? Well, yeah.
Question.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I have a question. I'm from Mexico City.
Oh,
and
yeah?
I came to California over 40 years ago. And I'm a journalist de la Universidad Nacional Autónoma de
Sí.
México. Yeah. You mentioned, or you said that the name Greaser. I used to be called Taco Head. Now the Border Patrol call OTMs.
Yes, right?
Other
OTMs.
than Mexicans, those
That's right.
who come from Central America.
Central America
If they
and South
identify
America.
their nationality, they
That's
call
right.
them Hondos, which is Honduras.
Right.
Now, my question to you is, are you planning to do a book related to the border, but a new border, with the newcomers from different countries, even from Central America? So, any ideas in your head talking about border issues, but not Mexican? Now it's more international. That's
It's
my
in
question to you.
every one of my books, desde el principio. They're not always about Mexicans. In the, in the beautiful north, I talk about Colombian people at the border. There was a while when I was really interested in Argentinos, but then Argentina calmed down. I've been touring, in Argentina and Colombia, so I'm kind of collecting stories from there too. Right now, it's Haitians. If vas a Tijuana, it's Haitians who escaped, the earthquake and the hurricanes. And it's really amazing to watch the transformation in Tijuana because people are learning French to talk to the Haitian people. And now the taco stands are giving way to Haitian food stands, which is really fascinating. I'm interested in all of that. But, I'm only one person. Superman could write 52 books a year. I can't. So I'm trying to get through the things that I personally have intimate witness with and family relationships with. And that was part of the point of House of Broken Angels, that, the family is here and that journey is kind of over. Don Luis.
Luis, can you tell us the most meaningful thought or feeling that anyone has ever shared with you
Oh, yeah.
about anything you've written?
About anything I've written. I can tell you two things that aren't about anything I've written, because I don't know. Feels egomaniacal. Let me tell you how wonderful I am, Luis. But I'll tell you two things that always changed directions for me. One was from an indigenous woman, Chinanteca woman, in the Tijuana garbage dump, who was picking trash one day, and there was a time when people from the US liked to go with me because they were afraid to go to the dump by themselves. So they would have me take them. And it was a deacon from Indianapolis named Bill. And Bill wanted to see it for Sunday school. I said, great, let's go. I took him down. And we were standing in the midst of all this stuff. And the pepenadores were working. It's an amazing place. It's skilled labor. You and I can't just walk in and do it. I mean, and they were working. And he found a belt with coins. And he said, I'd like to take this belt home to Sunday school and show the kids where human riches end up. This is great. Take it. And he said, I don't want to take it from them. And I called her, Hermanita Panchita. Oye, Panchita, ven. Sí, ¿qué pasó, güerito? I said, this man wants to take this belt home. Oh, yeah, it's a great belt. Que se lo lleve. I said, no, he doesn't want to take it away from somebody who could make money off it here, who needs it. And she said, turned into the Buddha for a second. She put her arms out and she said, brother, this is a dump. There's plenty for everybody. And I've never forgotten that. And the other one, which every time I write, which partially maybe answers your question too, is south of Tecate, there's a place called La Riera. Tecate is where Tecate beer comes from. Not that anybody in Notre Dame parties or drinks beer, but and La Riera is a place that has natural adobe. And the paracaidistas, the squatters came in and took the land over to make bricks. And I was there writing in my journal one day, and one of the brick makers was going by, and he stopped and he said, "Oye, ¿qué estás haciendo?" I said, "I'm writing in my journal." He said, "Haha, cool. What's a journal?" I said, "It's like a diary." "Oh, yeah?" "Yeah." "What's a diary?" I said, "It's a book where I write down what I see, what I'm doing." He said, "Wait, you're writing about here?" I said, "Sí, señor." "You're writing about the people here?" I said, "Yes." He said, "Are you writing about me?" And I didn't know what to say. And I said, "Probably." And he looked at me for a minute and he said, "You know what? Good. That's good. I was born in the garbage dump. I've lived my life picking trash. Y cuando me muera, me van a enterrar en el basurero. They're going to bury me in the trash." He said, "You tell them I was here." So, I'm just trying to tell everybody we were here. All of us. Including, Devil's Highway, even the pinche migra. I want to tell the story that they were here too. So those are two things that always haunt me. Always, every time I write. Thank you. Hey.
Thanks so much for your talk. You referenced Devil's Highway. I'm new to your work. I'm interested in reading more, but I just finished Devil's Highway as part of a campus-wide book discussion group, and it's phenomenal. The epigraph is song lyrics from a band that you're the fifth person I know who's actually heard of that band, the Sidewinders. And it's clear that you're, I don't know if you play rock and roll as well, but it's clear that you're a music fan in Devil's Highway. And I'm curious if you can talk, you earlier mentioned the sort of the different metaphorical as well as physical borders that separate people. And I wonder if you could reflect a little bit on music and popular music and sort of the border that seems to still exist in American popular music between sort of Mexican-inspired music and sort of so-called traditional rock and roll.
Well, talk about borders. Music has all kinds of borders. I know the guys from Sidewinders, and that was a song that haunted me all the time. Bad Crazy Son. And, I asked them for permission to use it, and they gave their blessing. So that's how that got in the book. I was not a musician. I wish I had been. I just wasn't coordinated enough to play music. If I had learned to play guitar, I always tell people I'd probably be in one of those dad bands, playing in bowling alleys all the time, playing blues or something. But that's what I really wanted to do. My family were musicians, at least part-time. They still, if you see my cousins, they're ambassadors, Mexican ambassadors and politicians, but they still get together and ring, ding, and these incredibly florid Mexican ballads that are beautiful. I think you can find the border everywhere. And it's fascinating. Our son is in a really successful Chicago rock band and tours a lot. And it's funny watching his journey because they started out as a pop punk band and then sort of a really rocking band, and now they're kind of turning into Maroon 5 or something, sort of like a metrosexual dance grooves band. And I thought, what did you do? And I know in his heart, what he really wants to do is keep moving toward hip hop. He's all of a sudden in love with hip hop. So I think there's this really fascinating movement afoot. I think, the young people are impatient with all of our foolish barriers at this point. And, I think it's good. I'm sad because the critics say that rock and roll music is moribund. It's gone. And I think, no, it's got to still be around. But, other things are coming. Things continually change. And I love it that this generation is so informed, networking, and international, right? And so one of the things that I see happening quite a bit, thanks to things like YouTube and La Face, and people who go tuiteando all the time, is you can't build a wall high enough to stop culture, art, music, poetry, films. It can't be stopped anymore. And, people in the Tijuana garbage dump, they put in an internet cafe for the garbage pickers, some guy's old laptop. But those girls that ended up being in Into the Beautiful North, they would watch videos at this guy's taqueria, and they would see the world that they hadn't seen on TV or anything else. And I think that's what's happening across the board. I think art. Again, if you go to Tijuana, there's this wonderful music group there called the Nortec Collective. And Nortec were DJs in the nightclubs. And they are great DJs, like the DJs that got really famous in the 90s and the early 2000s. But they were doing Mexican techno, using banda instruments instead of synthesizers. And they spawned this gigantic movement that's taking over Tijuana. It's a arts renaissance where they recognize themselves as a region that does a synthesis of all the cultures at once. And it's Spanish and English and French. It's techno and norteño and indigenous and classical. And there's a huge ballet movement now. There's a visual arts movement. There's a great literary movement. It's even becoming microbreweries, wine bars, fancy little beautiful restaurants, art galleries like you wouldn't believe. They now have a lending library in Tijuana that they never had before. So those things amaze me, to watch art fuel culture. And there's a composer in San Diego, Stephen Shik, that I work with, who did what I think is one of the most beautiful things ever. He concocted a concerto for Mexican and American orchestras. The Mexicans trapped on their side of the wall. The Americans held out on our side of the wall. He conducted them all at once via video so that this piece would go up into the air and not be able to be stopped. Everybody could hear it. His new idea, which I think is fantastic, he's a bit of a prankster. He wants to take a marching band to the heart of Tijuana in full regalia and have them march, playing American marching songs to the border, march through the border, and then start playing Mexican marching songs and march all the way into San Diego. And I was like, you're insane. This is fantastic. Because he's trying to find ways, again, to make this point that music, art, doesn't stop, And I love, by the way, rock en español is one of the most magical things in the world. And I think Americans are still suspicious of stuff if you don't understand the lyrics. But boy, some of that stuff is just brilliant. So I don't know if that answers your question, but that's how I think about it.
Luís will be signing books right outside. I don't know if there's any food there. If you're free to eat any food,
Okay.
food out there, please join me in thanking Luís for being with us.
Thank you.